Horror games. Just saying the name out loud sends chills down the spine of some of you. The unpleasant feeling of being scared isn't for everyone. However, some people absolutely love it. From ancient times, people gather around the campfires to tell the stories. And usually the stories were to scare you. What happens inside our bodies when we're being scared? Today, we're gonna try to answer these questions. Why do we love horror games? In 2021, a museum curator discovered the oldest known ghost drawing on a 3,500-year-old ancient Babylonian tablet that also included the instructions how to exorcise the unwanted spirit. Even 3,500 years ago, we already tried to scare each other. In 1896, the first horror film was created, The House of the Devil, Le Menu du Diable. The film started with the flying bat that suddenly transformed into a devil. The film is short, only about 3 minutes long. Although it's considered a horror film, its creator intended it more as a comedy. However, people saw it for the first time and felt fear. It was from a safe observer's perspective, but that did not help for people to feel fear. Horror enthusiasts had to be satisfied with films for almost 80 years until computer technologies allowed people to control characters in a horror setting for the first time. Haunted House, released in 1972 on the Magnavox Odyssey, was the first horror game that allowed players to fight for their lives while escaping from enemy. It may not be an impressive game compared to today's standards, but it was an important stepping stone for which many games took inspiration. One of those games is Alone in the Dark, a game that was released on MS-DOS and eventually ported to all the most popular platforms of that time. Speaking of stepping stones, for many games, this game particularly defined how horror games in the coming decade should look and function. It was the first to use pre-rendered backgrounds and the first to use polygons for its 3D characters. Thanks to this game, titles like Resident Evil and Silent Hill wouldn't exist, or at least not in the same way. Its premise was simple. You are a detective, tasked with investigating an old house. As soon as you step into the house, you get stuck inside. You have to survive the night and escape. When Alone in the Dark was released, we did not have a computer, but this CD was given to me from my grandfather, who is no longer with us. It was the last thing he gave me, which is why I still cherish it. Although I never completed the game, playing it always reminded me of my grandfather. Despite not understanding computers well, he recognized my hobby and gave me something that has stayed with me since then. The elements you see in this game, such as illogical puzzles, fixed camera angles and limited resources, can be found in the games that follow it. While the game received sequels, none of them achieved the same success as the original. The series shifted more towards action-adventure rather survival horror, losing its core audience and the atmosphere that was the game's main pillar. However, it provided the way for another game. In 1996, Capcom followed it in Infogrames' footsteps and created Resident Evil. Initially, Resident Evil supposed to be a remake of 1989 game Sweet Home, but it took its own direction during development. Resident Evil borrowed heavily from Alone in the Dark and managed to create a new franchise that continues to release games till these days. As team members explore a mansion, they encounter dangerous creatures, eventually discovering the series of illegal experiments were conducted by a clandestine research team under the Umbrella Corporation. The creatures are the result of these experiments, but all those games were just stepping stones for the game that loomed like a mountain in my childhood. Just hearing the music from this game still gives me chills. Every moment spent in front of the TV screen playing with my friend feels like a vividly relived experience. I do believe I was too young to play this game, as it stayed with me throughout my life and shaping my taste for horror. Thanks to it, I still fear the dark. Thanks to it, I love psychological horror. The game is called Silent Hill, released in 1999. Silent Hill is truly a masterpiece in horror. Due to efforts of highly talented individuals, this game ended up in my hands. The game follows Harry Mason as he searches for his missing adopted daughter in the eponymous fictional town of Silent Hill. It is considered by many to be one of the greatest video games ever made, as well as defining title in the survival horror genre, as it moved away from B-movie horror elements towards a more psychological horror style, emphasizing on atmosphere. The standout feature of the game was the shift of two worlds into hell and back. When it first happened to me, holy shit, I was scared. The dark, the limited view of your flashlight, and the radio combined to be a terrifying experience to have. Silent Hill's gameplay consists of combat, exploration, and puzzle solving, so basically Alone in the Dark, just with more psychological horror. Silent Hill has no heads-up display. The player must consult a separate menu to check Harry's health, just like in Resident Evil. But the best design aspect must be the radio.
What's that? Huh, radio. What's going on with that radio?
The sound it makes when enemies are close are chilling. The hissing sound it makes in a horror setting somehow managed to make a mundane thing terrifying. So sometimes I just left it off, because even though the radio should help you, it would scare me more than the monsters. This game looks like it was meant to be on PlayStation console. I keep constantly saying that PlayStation weren't powerful, but developers managed to make its limitations its biggest strength. Now when I see fog in other video games, I always be reminded where it came from. The game was very important and affected many people, including Christopher Gans, a film producer and screenwriter. In 2006, he wrote and directed a film with the same name as the game, Silent Hill. The film isn't bad if you played the game. In fact, the first time I watched it, I did not like it, but I cannot say exactly why I didn't like it. Maybe the lack of knowledge about the game's story at that time didn't help me, because in 2006, the year the movie came out, I still wasn't finished with the game. The film actually managed to stay quite true to the game, which is something movies based on games usually fail to do. Recently, I rewatched the film, and knowing the game's story really helped me to appreciate it. If you've seen this movie before and didn't like it, I recommend rewatching it again. You might find, as I did, that you enjoy it more the second time around. Even now, writing the script, I can see the PlayStation 1 graphics and its limitations. How they managed to achieve with so little is astounding. This game is important to me not only for its psychological horror aspect, but also for the time in my life when I played it. My best friend and I were about 14 years old, and it was summer vacation, so we spent almost all our time together with PlayStation controllers in hands. One day my friend came over with a few board games, having exchanged his for Gran Turismo and Silent Hill. Since we loved cars, we spent almost the whole day playing Gran Turismo, but when it got dark, he suggested trying the other disc he brought together with Gran Turismo. We had no idea what kind of game it was, we only knew the game's name, so we had no idea what awaited us. That night we played in turns, not because we had to, but because Neither of us could continue playing alone due to the fear we felt. When one of us could no longer handle it, the other took over, so we played until dawn. Next day, after sleeping all day, we met up in the evening to continue playing that wonderful game. The game had us. We had to continue playing it. We were engrossed in its story. This continued until we reached the hospital level, which was too much for us. The next day my friend returned the board game, but I still felt unresolved because we didn't finish it. The game defeated us. Years later, I tried playing it again. All the feelings, memories came flooding back. I couldn't sleep. I was constantly dreaming about the game. Again, reaching the hospital level, I set it aside. But every time I tried again, driven by the endless desire to conquer my fear. After several sleepless weeks, I finally saw the end credits of Silent Hill for the first time. By now you might say that's all good and handy, but what about horror games? Why do we like it? You didn't answer the question. Let's try to understand what we feel when we see horror. The rush. What do writing an exam and talking to your crush have in common? They both induce the feeling of fear. Although these experiences are different, your body produces very similar reactions. According to medical experts, when you feel in danger, your body triggers fight or flight response. Your pupils dilate, your heartbeat beats faster, and your blood pressure rises. These are evolutionary responses that help your body to survive. When video games envelops you with its scary images or sounds, your body starts reacting as if you were in danger, and you release large dose of adrenaline. If you're an adrenaline junkie, this is one way to safely experience the rush. Adrenaline is a chemical your body produces. Some people react more strongly to it than others. Therefore, it is possible to get used to it, just like any other substance. Of course, people don't just love horror games just because of adrenaline. A recent study showed that gender and age significantly impact your preference for horror. It is also found that if you like horror games, you probably have vivid imagination and believe in paranormal phenomena. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy horror games or movies. A good narrative is very important, as Noel Carroll wrote in his book The Philosophy of Horror. What drives people towards horror is curiosity. If the story is interesting, the curiosity to finding out what happens next keeps you going. Just like my curiosity drove me to find out how Silent Hill ends despite the fear I felt, knowing that the scariest thing is what your mind creates. The fear of not knowing how the great story ends is even greater. Thanks for watching.